Alright, today's lesson is solving absolute value equations. The absolute value of a number is the positive distance that number is from 0. So let's say this is 0. And I just using the natural numbers. Over here I have the negatives. And it keeps going. We use a symbol for absolute value. So let's say the absolute value of 3 equals 3 because we're saying the distance from 3 back to 0 is 1, 2, 3. And likewise, the absolute value of negative 3 is still 3 because from negative 3, if I count all the way back to 0, it's going to be a distance of 3. All right, solving equations, you got to keep that in mind. Let's say I have the absolute value of x equals 2. We're saying what numbers have a distance of 2 to 0 to satisfy that equation. So in this case, x could only equal 2 or x could equal negative 2. Simply because the absolute value of 2 equals 2. And we know that the absolute value of negative 2 also equals 2 because of the number line. That distance has to be the same. So it's going to be a unit of 2 either way. Distance of 2 all the way back to 0 is going to be the same distance. All right, solve x plus 2. The absolute value of x plus 2 equals 3. Or when you see an equation like this, you have to set up two possibilities. So one is x plus 2 equals 3. And the other is x plus 2 equals negative 3. And you solve for x. So I have to subtract 2 to both sides. I get x equals 1. And again, if I subtract 2 to both sides here, now I get x equals negative 5. So the numbers that satisfy this particular absolute value is negative 5 and 1. And if you plug it back in, you'll see that, let's say the absolute value of 1 plus 2 must equal 3 because 1 plus 2 is 3 and the absolute value of 3 does equal 3. And if I plug in negative 5, I get negative 5 plus 2. That tells me that the absolute value of negative 3 must equal 3, and we know that's true. All right, sometimes you get more complex problems like this. 4 times the absolute value of x plus 3 minus 7 equals 5. What you want to do is get the absolute value by itself. So first thing I would do is get rid of the 7. You have a 7 subtracted to it, so I can add 7 to both sides. So now what I have is 4 times the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 12. And since 4 is multiplied to the absolute value, I can divide that to both sides. So I have the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 3. So now I have two equations. I can say x plus 3 equals 3. I subtract 3 to both sides. I know x is 0. Then your other possibility is x plus 3 equals negative 3. And if I subtract 3 to both sides, I get x equals negative 6. So x has to equal negative 6 and 0 are the only two solutions for that. All right, solve 1/2 times absolute value of x minus 2 plus 3 equals 4. Well, like we did in the other problem, you want to get rid of what's added or subtracted to it first. So I have a 3 added to the absolute value. I'm going to subtract 3 to both sides. So I have 1/2 absolute value of x minus 2 equals 1. And now I want to get rid of the 1/2. What I can do is multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that. So now 2 times 1/2 is 1. So I have the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 2 times 1 is 2. And now I have two equations I must solve. I get x minus 2 equals 2. If I add 2 to both sides, x has to equal 4. And the other equation is x minus 2 equals negative 2. If I add 2 to both sides, I get x equals 0. So you know x equals 0 and 4 are the only two numbers that satisfy that absolute value. Okay, solve negative 2 times the absolute value of x minus 1 plus 4 equals negative 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 to both sides. So I get negative 2 times x minus 1 equals negative 8. And I can divide both sides by negative 2. So I get the absolute value of x minus 1 equals 4. And again, you have two equations. X minus 1 equals 4. Add 1 to both sides. X equals 5. And the second equation is x minus 1 equals negative 4. Add 1 to both sides. X is going to equal negative 3. So x equals negative 3 and 5. These are the two solutions. This concludes our lesson for today.